Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Tuesday, the 25th of November. You're tuned in to our mid-morning newscast here on Arirang TV. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Mark Broome. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. The South Korean military carries out a drill aimed at defending the nation's easternmost Dokdo Island from external intruders. Seoul says Tokyo's ongoing claims to Dokdo are completely unjustifiable. In the first major change to President Obama's cabinet since his Democrats were routed in midterm elections 3 weeks ago, Chuck Hagel steps down as U.S. Defense Secretary after less than 2 years in the post. Plus, the United States holds its breath as it awaits the announcement of the Ferguson grand jury's decision on the fatal shooting of an African-American teenager by a white police officer. But we start a little closer to home with the Korean military's biannual defense drills around Korea's easternmost Dokdo Island. A military official says the country's Army, Navy, Air Force and the Coast Guard all took part in the one-day training exercise on Monday with the aim to stop external forces landing on Dokdo. The Marine Corps, however, did not take part due to bad weather. They were scheduled to be involved. The Japanese embassy in Seoul protested the exercise, which the Korean government later flatly rejected. Japan falsely claims ownership of those rocky islets. A joint railway project involving both Koreas and Russia is about to kick off. South Korean officials are now in the north for a trial to transport Russian goods from a port in North Korea. For a look at how the supplies will end up in South Korea and how the process will work the other way around, our Lee reports.
Over 40,000 tons of Russian coal will land on South Korean soil this week. What's so special about that is that the coal will actually travel through North Korea. A group of South Korean officials arrived in the North Korean port of Najin on Monday to oversee a test run scheduled for this Friday. This test run will include delivering the coal from the Russian station of Hasan to Najin on a 54-kilometer railway. Once the coal reaches Najin, it will be shipped on a Chinese bulk carrier to South Korea's southeastern port of Pohang. So what's in it for these three countries as they get ready to mark the first test run of the Najin-Hasan project? Russia sees the new export route as a gateway to opening up its far eastern regions. North Korea is looking to develop the Najin port to not only export resources like coal from Russia and China, but also to move manufactured goods from South Korea and Japan into Asia. For South Korea, the project will cut down shipping costs and promote more trade with other European countries. Experts say the project might also help mend inter-Korea relations and build trust between the two countries. South Korea banned investments in North Korea after the regime torpedoed a South Korean warship in 2010, suspending almost all inter-Korean economic projects. The government, however, has allowed the consortium to indirectly invest by purchasing Russian stakes in the initiative. Lee, Arirang News.
And while we're speaking of ties with Russia, namely North Korea's ties with Moscow, Pyongyang Special Envoy Che Ryong-hae has wrapped up his week-long trip to Russia. The North state-run Korean Central News Agency reports that Che, who is a very close aide to leader Kim Jong-un, returned to Pyongyang with his delegation on Monday. During his visit, he delivered a personal letter from the young leader to Russian President Vladimir Putin, signaling the possibility of a summit next year. The trip is being seen as part of Pyongyang's efforts to try and improve its ties with Moscow as the regime finds itself increasingly isolated from its longtime ally, Beijing. Turning now to South Korea's National Assembly, where lawmakers have begun reviewing bills on improving the grave human rights situation in North Korea. This following a UN resolution on this very issue last week. They aim to pass legislation by the end of the year, but the rival parties are still poles apart on some extremely key issues. Our Ji Myung-gil has this report.
The National Assembly is stepping up efforts to pass bills on North Korean human rights, in line with recent efforts from the international community. The Parliamentary Foreign Affairs Committee on Monday began reviewing two bills related to North Korean human rights, one proposed by the ruling Saenuri Party and the other by the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy. The ruling party's bill focuses on documenting violations carried out by Pyongyang and developing plans to improve human rights conditions in the north.
A national archive should be set up separately to deal with storing and keeping record of human rights violations in North Korea.
The main opposition's bill puts an emphasis on supporting the North Korean people through humanitarian aid.
A consultative body will be established within the Unification Ministry to engage in aid project for the North Korean people.
Both parties say they hope to pass the bills by the end of this year. But the two rival parties will first have to resolve their long-standing differences over the issue. A main source of contention is a suggestion from the ruling Saenuri Party that the human rights bill include government assistance to activist groups that fly anti-North Korea leaflets across the border. The main opposition party says if the bill includes any language indicating support for such groups, they will not pass it. The National Assembly has put the revised bills on the human rights issue up for discussion several times since its first proposal back in 2005. Previous plans for the bills on the issue were shelved due to concerns mainly from the opposition party that pursuing such legislation could escalate inter-Korean tensions. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Now, as the United States struggles to define its strategy against the group that calls itself Islamic State, one of its key officials has stepped down. U.S. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel has only been in office for 2 years, and despite some kind words from President Obama, sources suggest Hagel was forced out because of perceived failures and a clash of opinions. Hagel's departure is of interest here in Korea as well, as his replacement could have different ideas about Washington's defense strategy here in Asia. Our Choi Yu-son reports.
It's been the greatest privilege of my life, to lead, and most important, to serve with the men and women of the Defense Department and support their families.
The U.S. Defense Secretary's resignation on Monday is the Obama administration's first cabinet shakeup after the Democratic Party suffered crushing losses in midterm elections a few weeks ago. Praising Hagel's ability to balance defense reforms at home and addressing external security challenges, President Obama, however, did not mention the specifics that led to his departure.
Now, last month, Chuck came to me to discuss the final quarter of my presidency and determined that having guided the department through this transition, it was an appropriate time for him to complete his service.
When the former Republican senator and Vietnam War veteran was appointed to head the Pentagon nearly 2 years ago, he was tasked with bringing home troops from Afghanistan and Iraq and slashing the defense budget. Since then, Washington's military policies have shifted in response to growing security threats from Islamic State militants in Iraq and Syria. Reports had emerged of a rift between Hagel and the administration on the U.S. strategy against the extremist group. Analysts suggest Hagel may have been the fall guy as the Republicans, now in control of both congressional houses, are expected to scrutinize the administration's foreign policies. Hagel will stay in his role until his successor is named and confirmed by the Senate. Some possible candidates include Michelle Flournoy, a former Undersecretary of Defense, and former Deputy Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter. Choi Yu-son, Arirang News.
Now, in global news this morning, a grand jury in Ferguson has reached a decision on whether a white police officer, Darren Wilson, who shot and killed unarmed black teenager Michael Brown, will face charges in a court of law. For the latest on this story that is very fluid at the moment, let's connect to Eunice Kim, standing by at the news centre for us. Good morning, Eunice.
And good morning to you, Mark.
So, Eunice, that decision, months in the making, is expected to be announced, we hear, within the next hour or so.
Yes, and a whole community, if not country, is holding their breaths for it in this case of alleged police brutality that has deeply divided along racial lines. Missouri Governor Jay Nixon, who has been in Ferguson for days now amid a state of emergency, appealed for peace, respect, and restraint, whatever the outcome.
Together, we are all focused on making sure the necessary resources are at hand to protect lives, protect property, and protect free speech.
Key buildings have been secured, schools have been closed, and National Guard troops are on standby as the small Midwestern town of Ferguson braces for this decision that, again, we've learned will be publicized at 9 p.m. Eastern Time within the next hour or so. The grand jury, made up of 9 whites and 3 blacks, have been hearing testimony for nearly 3 months since that fateful day that recent high school graduate 18-year-old Michael Brown was shot dead on August 9th. If it is agreed that Officer Darren Wilson behind that gun will be indicted, legal experts say he could face a range of charges from second-degree murder to involuntary manslaughter. There are also reports that Officer Wilson, who remains on paid administrative leave, has been in talks to resign from his post in the coming days.
Well, Eunice, we should have the verdict by noon Korea time, so we'll have all the details on the announcement. You'll be bringing that to us in our next newscast.
That's right.
Meanwhile, in our next story, and on the diplomatic front, negotiations in the Austrian capital, Vienna, have failed to produce a comprehensive agreement on Iran's nuclear program, but world powers and Iran will continue to talk.
Right. Negotiators at the 6 world powers and Iran are giving themselves 7 more months to iron out the differences that still remain between them. That deadline extended through June 30th or July 1st of next year, depending on who you talk to. They'll reconvene next month at a venue to be announced to discuss to what extent Tehran's nuclear development will be curbed in exchange for lifting economic sanctions. Under an interim nuclear agreement, Tehran will receive another $5 billion in sanctions relief under the understanding that it will refrain from sensitive nuclear activity. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani, who came into office with the promise to reach a nuclear deal to lift those crippling sanctions, said most gaps had narrowed during these recent talks, while U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said they were substantial but tough and anticipated it to remain tough. And Mark, though we didn't see that comprehensive deal this time around, what that would have been historic, a nugget of good news here is progress. The typical icy relations between Iran and the West appears to be warming.
Yes, well, no breakthrough, but with anything this complex, it is going to take time. And like you say, it's good to see that the talks are being conducted in rather a friendly manner. Thanks, Eunice, and we'll speak to you again during our next newscast.
Says that a team of South Korea.
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. ARIRANG News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers $15 billion. Now, back to some domestic news. And a centre for the creative economy has opened in Korea's southwestern province of Jeollabuk-do. And cutting the ribbon on the centre on Monday was President Park Geun-hye. And she said that she hoped it would play a key role in developing the nation's carbon fibre industry. Our Hwang Jie reports.
For the first time since taking office, President Park Geun-hye visited Jeollabuk-do province on Monday to celebrate the opening of a creative economy center. Park said the center should act to harmonize traditional and new growth engines.
특히 전통 문화와 농생명, 탄소 산업의 대도약을 이루기 위해 약한 부분을 보완하는 연결고리가 되어야 합니다.
The Creative Economy Center in Jeollabuk-do Province aims to boost the carbon fiber industry as Korea's next growth engine. It's the third center of its kind established under the Park administration's pledge to boost startups. Each local center teams up with one of the country's largest conglomerates to support venture companies in that related industry. The one in Jeollabuk-do Province is partnered with Hyoseong Group.
작년에 준공된 효성 공장에서 생산되는 탄소 섬유는 수천 년간 제조업의 기본 소재였던 철을 대체할 미래 산업의 쌀로 주목받고 있습니다.
Hyoseong Group and Jeollabuk-do Province plan to create a fund of roughly $9 million to foster the country's carbon fiber industry. They will also build a center for startups within Hyoseong's carbon fiber factory in the region. And through that, they aim to foster 20 startups in the carbon fiber sector into becoming global companies within the next 3 years. The government plans to establish a total of 17 creative economy centers across the country with involvement from conglomerates like Samsung and Hyundai. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Korean stocks got a boost on Monday on the back of growing speculation. China has plans to cut its key interest rate for a second consecutive month. This following its unexpected cut last Friday. Korea's main benchmark Kospi rose 0.7% on the first day of the trading week, and this means it's edging ever closer to the psychologically important 2,000 level. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Another rate cut by the world's second largest economy is expected, as Friday's cut in its main benchmark interest rate may not be enough to boost growth. Park Seok-jung, an economist for high investment and securities, says increases in China's money supply, including its cash and savings deposits, rose a mere 12.6% in November, falling below its yearly target of 13%. Kim Kyung-han, an analyst for Hana Taeju Securities Company, predicts Beijing will cut its main rates by up to 40 basis points in 2015 due to its weak fundamentals concerning consumption and real estate. China's retail sales shrank by 1 percentage point to 12% in the first 9 months of this year, according to China's National Bureau of Statistics. The country's real estate climate index stood unchanged from the previous month at 95 in September, below the benchmark 100, which points to depression in business activity for land capital and sales of real estate. Friday's cut in China's main benchmark interest rate was a first in 28 months, which lowered its one-year lending rates by 40 basis points to 5.6%. The move led to gains in Korean shares on Monday, particularly those related to steel and oil products, as it's expected China will import more of these goods to boost economic activity. Korea's benchmark Kospi rose 0.7% from the previous trading day to close at about 1,980 points, buoyed by expectations the Chinese economy will recover following Beijing's bold stimulus measures. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Now to a story that's been in the headline in recent weeks, and Korea's Fair Trade Commission will launch an inquiry into the product pricing of the world's largest furniture retailer, Ikea, which will open its first store in Korea next month. This comes in response to allegations the company has set higher prices in Korea, up to nearly double the price seen in other parts of the world. An official from the watchdog told reporters on Monday that a consumer group will be tasked with comparing Ikea's retail prices in Korea to other countries. The results will be published around February. While the study does not insinuate the Swedish giant is up to anything fishy, the Commission says the findings will help consumers make smarter choices and may pressure Ikea to voluntarily cut its prices. 3D printing technologies have come forward leaps and bounds in recent years, and now a new era has arrived where people can scan objects with their hands thanks to a mobile 3D camera developed by local researchers. Ao Son Jung-in reports.
3D printing, which has been referred to as the third industrial revolution, opened up a new era where people can access to 3D scanning and printing at their fingertips. Korea's Electronics and Telecommunications Research Institute has developed a 3D scanning system that allows users to send 3D printable files from their smartphones.
The key of this technology is the free mobility of the device, which the users can easily scan the desired object and send the data in real time.
Researchers from the Institute incorporated handheld 3D scanner technology, also developed by local engineers. By attaching a small camera onto a smartphone, it transforms the phone into a 3D scanner that works as the user moves the device in their hands. Users can test its effectiveness through simulation before printing to avoid any possible mistakes. The technology is expected to be commercialized by first half next year and be put to use in a wide range of areas.
We plan to supply the device to schools with professional designers. Since it is locally developed, we can produce it at 1/10 the price of other foreign-made products.
The global 3D scanner market is growing at 12% every year. Local researchers hope this new device helps them become leaders of the industry in the future. 손정인, 아리랑 뉴스.
And a good Tuesday morning to you all as we kick things off with the ongoing issue with Ikea Tigers Yang Yeon-jung and his quest to go over to the major leagues. Now, although reports initially surfaced that the Minnesota Twins were the highest bidder over the weekend, turns out that might have been a false rumor. Now, with the Ikea Tigers still mum on who the highest bidder was and how much the final bid was for the lefty ace, new reports have surfaced on Monday stating that the Minnesota Twins were not the highest bidders, but the Texas Rangers. The new report also added that the highest bid was roughly $1.5 million, but both the Ikea Tigers and Yang Yeon-jung will wait until the 28th to reveal their final decision. If Yang does join the Rangers, he's set to play alongside another Korean star in Chu Shin-soo. And shifting over to the LPGA, where the final tournament of the season capped off an incredible season for one team as 17-year-old Lydia Ko finished off the year with a bang after winning the CME Group Tour Championship. Now, what initially started off as Park In-bi versus Stacey Lewis turned into an incredible run by Korean native Lydia Ko, who would finish tied for first at 10 under par after the final hole. And after winning the fourth sudden death playoff hole, the teen sensation claims the $500,000 prize. But with the victory, she also won the race to the CME Globe, cashing in another $1 million in prize money for a total of $1.5 million, the largest payout in women's golf history. Meanwhile, Stacey Lewis, who finished tied for ninth, would clinch this year's LPGA Player of the Year honors, beating out her rival, Park In-bi. Well, it certainly was disappointing to see Park In-bi fall short in her quest for a back-to-back Player of the Year honors, but it wasn't all bad as the Korean golfer did finish the year #1. Now, a roller coaster of a season for Park In-bi, who started off the year at #1 before losing that spot to Stacey Lewis after struggling quite a bit in the first half of the season. The 26-year-old would fix her putting problems and eventually improve her game once again to retain her #1 ranking towards the end of the year. And despite Stacey Lewis claiming the 2014 LPGA Player of the Year honors, Park accumulated enough points to hold on to her #1 world ranking going into the 2015 season. And finishing things off in swimming, Chinese swimmer Sun Yang certainly had a roller coaster of a year himself with controversies off the swimming pool and then dominating performance at the Incheon Asian Games. But new reports show he was caught with a banned substance before the Asian Games. In a report issued on Monday, the Olympic gold medalist was tested positive for a banned substance back in May and served a 3-month suspension, which was never revealed prior to the Incheon Asian Games. However, the Chinese argue that he did face the suspension either way and doesn't affect his participation at the Incheon Asian Games. Meanwhile, Sun Yang finished the recent Asian Games with 3 gold medals and a silver medal. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. Well, unlike gloomy day we had yesterday, it's much brighter today. Skies are clear and the sun will continue to dominate the whole peninsula throughout the day. And temperatures will fully respond. The top temperatures will elevate even higher than yesterday, hovering in the mid-teens across the region. So let's take a closer look at the readings for today. Now, the afternoon temperature in Seoul and Daegu will rise to 14, while Gwangju and Busan will top out at 15 this afternoon. And as for the other regions, Dokdo Island will be getting up to 14, and Daejeon and Dokdo will see highs of 13 and 10, and Mount Keungang only reaches at -1. Now, temperatures will remain above the seasonal averages through the week. In fact, remainder of November is looking promising with highs in the low to mid-teens. But nationwide showers are in the forecast on Friday, but mercury will not be affected by it. Well, that's all for now. Let's send it back to Mark in the studio.
Thank you ever so much, Jion, for the weather. And that's all we have for now. We'll be back with our next newscast at noon Korea time. Until then, goodbye.